Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Shura, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. Robert Harding, Justin Ritzel. Yep, it's time for another edition of the Sports Weekly, as I like to call it, the day that I actually take a shower, shave, and put gel in my hair. Anyways, the joys of working from home. So
I'm sure viewers needed to know about your weekly shower habits.
I do. I shower more than one day a week. I can tell you that. But I specifically definitely do it this day. So, look at this guy. All right, so we're going to do our NFL award winners, who we think are the NFL award winners, and I will do a quick recap of last week's games. Robert, 2-0. Congratulations against the spread. Justin,
it was a great week for me.
Justin 1-1, and then yours truly 0-2. Ouch, ouch. But hey, I've already clinched it, so it's all moot. So, all righty. So, obviously, the biggest story right now in sports, besides the NFL, is the lawsuit that former Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores has filed against the league, specifically mentioning three teams: the Giants, the Broncos, and of course, my Miami Dolphins. There, another black eye for the Fins, and he is alleging that the Rooney Rule is a sham, basically, that his interviews were basically charades. They didn't really mean much, that the league is basically involved in systemic racism. And, of course, for me being the Dolphins fan, the juiciest tidbit is the fact that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross offered to pay Brian Flores $100,000 for each loss back in 2019. We all knew the team was tanking anyways, okay? Basically said the quiet part out loud. If you lose, I'll give you more money. And, look, I've been a Dolphins fan for 48 years. I've been through the ups and I've been through the downs. And as you can see by my attire, my faith in my team will never, ever waver, okay? I will wear aqua and orange to my last breath. That being said, sell the team, Ross. Enough. 12 years of incompetence, one playoff appearance, no playoff wins. Four coaches? It's been a horrible tenure for this guy. Now, look, he puts money into the team. He puts money in the facilities. He renovated the stadium with his own money, although he wasn't going to get public money, so he had to pay for his own stadium renovations. He built a new training facility. He's brought other events like F1 and tennis to the area and everything. Great. But as a football owner, Mr. I don't want to say Mr. Ross, Steve, can we kind of call you Steve? You've been horrible. We've had Bullygate. You went after Jim Harbaugh when you were employing Tony Sperano, a big faux pas. And now you could hire Jim Harbaugh and you're not touching him. You go, he's the Michigan coach, and I went to Michigan. I donated hundreds of $1 millions to get the business school, my name on it. I can't hire him. Dude, it's your football team. You want to win, don't you? Hire the best coach. But this Flores stuff is horrible, okay? And if you fired him because, he didn't tank well enough for you, or he didn't want to tamper with Tom Brady, it's just bad. I mean, look, Flores actually did a halfway decent job. I'll tip my cap to the guy. He had 2 winning seasons. That's two more winning seasons than any other Dolphin coach has had since, Dave Wanstead back in the turn of the century. Horrible. I mean, if you got to compare him to Dave Wanstead, things are pretty bad, okay? So, Steve Ross, sell the team. Do it now. Please just sell it to someone who actually knows what they're doing. Goodbye. Good riddance. Good day. I'm done, guys. Have at it.
Well, I'll make it quick so we can get to our awards. But this whole thing, I think, I won't get into the Dolphins piece because I think you addressed that, Chris. But I think it'll have ramifications going forward for the coaching searches and certainly enforcement of the Rooney Rule. I think they have to do something about it to give it more teeth. I know that they've tried to provide incentives to get teams to abide by it, but I think you need to add a little more behind it than just, if you do it, then we'll give you a little bit in return. I think if you don't do it, you need to come down hard on these teams for bypassing process and giving all of the candidates a fair shot. this whole thing I think is revealing about the NFL. The fact that Flores apparently finds out by accident from a text from Bill Belichick that another Brian Dable, got the job in with New Jersey's own Giants. I think that that just shows you, there's these guys all talk to each other, or at least there's certain circles of people that talk to each other, and Dable ends up being the guy. And I don't think it's an accident that Belichick knew, because I'm sure that the Giants, just like any other job, contacted Belichick, for a reference of some sort. Like, what do you think of this guy? He was on your staff. What do you think of him? But I think that going forward, they need to come up with a way to give minority coaches more of a shot. And quite frankly, it starts with the owners, all of whom, with the exception of I think maybe a few, are white. And I think that does play a role in how the hiring goes. Same for the front offices, the general managers and those executives. I think that impacts it too. So, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that comes out of this, other than, whatever happens with Stephen Ross trying to pay off his coach to intentionally lose or whatever. That could have major repercussions. But I think, the NFL is going to see this as a black eye, and they're going to want to try and fix it somehow. I don't know what that fix is, but it's clear that they need to address this, because it's getting pretty bad that there's qualified black coaches. Eric Bieniemy's another example, Leslie Frazier with the Bills, and they aren't getting a shot. And we see, the Jim Harbaughs of the world kind of cruise to the front of the line when he couldn't even win anything with Michigan. So all very interesting to me. I hope the NFL figures this out so these guys can get a fair shot at these jobs.
I'll make this real quick and I'll let Justin get his piece in. But to me, if I'm Flores' lawyers, Exhibit A is Adam Gase. Really, Adam Gase gets fired by the Dolphins, and a week later goes to the Jets and lasts 2 years and does an even worse job with the Jets. Okay, you're trying to tell me that any black coach, if had Adam Gase's record with the Dolphins, which was horrible, although they did make the playoffs the first year, but still was an absolute horrible coach, gets another job within a week of getting fired? Come on, please. That just shows you how bad the system is. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I have a hard time seeing how basically racism can be proven through a lawsuit. I mean, look at the Giants situation, for example. You have a GM who worked in Buffalo. Obviously he's going to have ties to Brian Dable, and he's going to favor him when it comes to the interview process. So I just don't know how you go about fixing it when, a lot of times the NFL is a relationship business, and you see a lot of people get their jobs strictly because of who they know. And, in the Giants case, that's obviously what happened. And, Brian Dable is qualified to be a head coach. So if the Giants think he's rightfully the best guy for the job, I guess that's maybe a little unfair to Brian Dable. But at the same time, you're seeing black head coaches get fired, and like you guys said, not be given the same opportunity for new jobs. Brian Flores, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago at the end of the regular season when all these firings happened. I don't think he should have been fired. He took a crappy situation, a bad team, and they outperformed their expectations. Did it lead to playoff appearances? No, but proof is in the pudding. The owner wanted them to lose, and he did not do that. He was not set up for success. I could certainly poke holes in kind of some of the things Brian Flores chose to do with his offensive staff that I think were a little weird. But, the guy put together 2 winning seasons, as Chris said. He was a respected assistant coach with the Patriots. He should be a head coach somewhere, even if I don't agree with every single thing that he did during his time with Miami. And then you look at David Culley in Houston, lost his job after 1 year, took the job just a completely unforgiving situation with the Deshaun Watson stuff, and that was already a bad team to begin with. and I think they finished 4-13, and they won 4 more games than I thought they were gonna. Like, why is he losing his job after 1 year? So, yeah, it seems that the standard for certain white head coaches is not as high as a black head coach. You know, if you want to be a black head coach and stick around, you really, really got to perform, and that's, you know, that shouldn't matter. I don't know how this gets solved. You know, I don't know how you prove that teams are basing hirings off of a person's skin color other than just the sheer amount of white coaches versus black coaches. But, you know, it's tough for me to really talk about this subject because I don't have an answer. I don't know how you can, aside from incentivizing things like Robert said, you know, I think that it's a relationship business, and for whatever reason, you know, whether it be Kyle Shanahan always hiring his buddies to be a head coach, or Sean McVay, or any of these guys, for whatever reason, that lends itself to more white guys getting opportunities. It's certainly not right. There's a lot of qualified black candidates out there. It's just unfortunate that I don't know if there's a great answer to this issue right now.
I think after what happened with the John Gruden email dump a few months ago, and the fact that it was with Bruce Allen, who was in charge of the Redskins, the team formerly known as the Redskins, now known as the Commanders. I mean, I think that kind of shows you some of the mentality of some of the people in the higher echelons of the NFL front offices and ownership, to be honest with you. Didn't the now deceased owner of the Texans basically said, oh, we can't let the inmates run the prison or something like that. I mean, something that was kind of borderline racist. So, you know, Jerry Richardson, the former owner of the Carolina Panthers, lost his team because of sexist and racist remarks and actions. So, I mean, look, that's ultimately where it comes down to, is that the NFL owners are 32 white guys, and it's rare when they're going to go outside their comfort zone and hire a black coach. And it's sad that they don't, because there are some good black coaches out there that do deserve head coaching jobs, and they deserve a fair shot, and they should have it. So, all right, guys, you ready to move on?
Look at the 2 teams who were in the NFC Championship. Look at their defenses. They were coached by 2 black guys, D'Amico Ryans, who used to be a player for the Texans, you know, coincidentally, and Raheem Morris, who used to actually be the Buccaneers head coach, which was a bad situation then. So, yeah, you know, like, again, you can't say that there aren't qualified guys who don't deserve at least legitimate interviews and opportunities, because there are. You just got to be willing to look.
Yep. All right, so we're going to start with our awards of the NFL season. And for me, I know that when the AP does their awards, it's based off the regular season. Since we're doing these now, I'm going to kind of balance it between the postseason and the regular season. Some of these might differ a little bit, but that's just my opinion. So, all right. So we'll go through, we'll make our picks consecutive. I won't go through all mine, and we'll just do it. So, comeback player of the year, I got Joe Burrow. The guy, you know, he had a bad knee injury last season, came back, had a very good regular season. Of course, he's gotten his team to the Super Bowl. So that's my pick for comeback player of the year, Joe Burrow. Robert, who's your pick?
I agree with you, Chris. I had Burrow here as well. You know, I thought he lit it up this year, and he stayed healthy. Over 4,000 yards, 34 touchdown passes. You know, that's a great season, and obviously it's shown out through the playoffs. You know, he's really established himself as one of the top passers in the game. So, yeah, I had him here. I thought, you know, Dak Prescott was, you know, certainly another contender here. And, you know, I'm sure that he'll get some sympathy votes. But for me, his play down the stretch in the regular season was really the difference. That, you know, he didn't play as well. And Burrow certainly played well and has continued to play well as the season winds down.
Justin.
Yeah, maybe this is just confirmation bias. I'm going to go with Dak Prescott. I said he was a shoo-in before the season started. Joe Burrow certainly made it more of a conversation than I anticipated. But I factor in what they're coming back from. You know, Joe Burrow had an ACL injury, which I don't want to like diminish that. That is a serious injury, but you know, we see guys these days with modern science, they come back from ACL injuries, and maybe they're not 100% what they were the first year back, but a lot of them get pretty darn close. So, you know, ACL injuries have gotten to a point where they just happen so often, and you see guys coming back. From that aspect, I'm impressed more what Dak was able to do, just because his, leg, ankle, foot, whatever it was a gruesome injury. And you've seen players, basketball players suffer injuries like that, and they never look right again. So I think their numbers are similar enough where I'm going to side with Dak just because of the nature of his injury. I think I don't think enough is being made of kind of coming back from that, which is the award. That's the spirit of the award. So I go with Dak.
All right. Defensive Rookie of the Year. I got Dallas linebacker Micah Parsons. He just dominated. I think you could almost make the case for him for not just Rookie of the Year, but Defensive Player of the Year. But I've got him as my Defensive Rookie of the Year. Robert?
I agree with you again, Chris. I watched a lot of Cowboys games this year, and I was just impressed with Parsons' range. Going into the NFL draft, he was rated in a lot of different rankings as the top player in the draft. A lot of focus was on the traditional skill positions, the Kyle Pittses and Jamar Chases of the world. But this was a guy that everybody knew had a lot of talent and the ability to play different positions. And he started out at middle linebacker, but they said, let's move him to the edge and see what happens. Well, what happened was he had 13 sacks this year. So I think they found something there. He certainly has that versatility, and I think this might be one of the easiest picks for the AP voters that he'll be the Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, make it a clean sweep. These are the only kind of things Dallas ever wins is postseason awards. So might as well give it to him. I'll go with Parsons too.
All righty. Our next one is Offensive Rookie of the Year. I've got Jamar Chase. I think he's the difference why the Bengals are in the Super Bowl this year. Just had an incredible rookie season. 81 catches, 1,455 yards, and 13 touchdowns. I think the numbers speak for themselves. Go ahead, Robert. Who do you have?
Yeah, it was interesting researching this to see how, how much, Mac Jones is getting some love from people for what he did, or, I don't think he did much, but sure, give him some recognition, I guess. But to me, it's easily Chase, and the stats speak for themselves, I think, but just the way he carried himself, he looked like an established receiver in this game. And, that's not an easy thing for a rookie to do, to come in, especially at that position when you're going up against some of the top corners of the game, and to really show out like he did. So, for me, this was a no-brainer.
Justin?
Yeah, again, I'll go with Chase. I just think he was an electric player for the Bengals this year. Mac Jones looked like the no doubt favorite midway through the season, the way the Patriots were playing. But, he just had a lot of kind of unimpressive games where he was just there. I think, yes, quarterbacks are more valuable than wide receivers, but that in the context of this award, I don't really factor that in. I think it's just who performed the best, regardless of position. And Jamar Chase was a borderline All-Pro, so he gets my nod.
Defensive Player of the Year. I've got Steelers defensive lineman TJ Watt. Set the sacks record, I believe. Just an incredible season. And what?
Tied the sacks record.
Oh, he tied it. Okay, I thought he broke it, but tied it. But another guy the Dolphins passed on. They picked Charles Harris instead of TJ Watt, but an incredible player for the Steelers in that tradition of the Steel Curtain. Robert, who do you have?
I have Watt too. I think certainly you could add Parsons to this conversation.
Yep.
Trevon Diggs, what he did as a corner in Dallas. I think Diggs is really the guy that I would look to here. Just in terms of his playmaking ability. But yeah, I mean what TJ Watt does. And not just the sacks either. This guy can create turnovers, which is a huge thing for any team. Whenever you have a guy that can make those kinds of plays and change a game, that makes a huge difference. And it certainly did for the Steelers. I don't think they get in the playoffs without TJ Watt. So, and that speaks highly of, the kind of edge rusher he is and the kind of player he is. So for me, this was a lock.
Justin.
Yeah, I mean, this award basically, comes down to either we're going to give it to Aaron Donald or we're going to give it to the guy with the most sacks. Like, you really don't see just the player who racked up the most interceptions win it. Like, I know Stephon Gilmore won it a couple of years ago, but he was just a shutdown corner. I remember your boy there, Xavier Howard, had a lot of interceptions a few years ago, and
last year.
I don't think he didn't really get a lot of consideration, which, I think that should. This is like a pass rusher award, basically. It's what it's turned into. So, with that in mind, I guess you got to give it to T.J. Watt. Most sacks in the league. He tied for the most pressures with Myles Garrett. I think really those two are, aside from Donald, probably the two best candidates. But Myles Garrett got hurt at the end of the year and really slowed down his production. So just for the fact that T.J. Watt was just more consistent, I think he gets the benefit of the doubt here.
Okay. Offensive Player of the Year. Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He had 145 catches, over almost, what do you have, like over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. So an amazing performance, and I give it to him. Definitely Offensive Player of the Year. Robert, who do you have?
I've never agreed with you this much, Chris.
I was going to say, this has never happened before.
I went with Cooper Kupp too. To me, this was, and this goes for the MVP conversation too. I was really looking for a way to elevate Jonathan Taylor because I think he really carried the Colts this year. But A, they didn't make the playoffs, and B, I think he kind of slowed down at the end of the year. Yeah. He wasn't having those big games like he had midway through the season. So, for me, this one, again, another no-brainer. I think the numbers that he put up, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying like, oh, I'll give it to a quarterback. And they might do that this year. If they give Rodgers the MVP, maybe they give Brady Offensive Player of the Year, or they give Rodgers both awards, who knows? But, with the numbers he put up, I think you can easily make the argument that he deserves the award. Just incredible numbers, great rapport with Matt Stafford. And of course, we're going to see that in the Super Bowl. Hopefully he puts up big numbers. I plan on putting some money on him. So
I was just going to say he's my sleeper pick for MVP. I got to admit, I might put some money down on him to win MVP. So, Justin, who do you have as Offensive Player of the Year?
We must have different definitions of what a sleeper is. I mean, Cooper Kupp's going to have like probably the third best odds of winning Super Bowl MVP outside of the quarterbacks. So, obviously, Chris, your inexperience with fantasy football shows there due to the lack of knowledge of the definition of sleeper. But I digress. The issue for me with Jonathan Taylor is that, for one, I think he, aside from the Bills when he just straight up dominated, but you could look at his absolute best games, and he did well against the Patriots too. I'll give him that. But the games where he really racked up the numbers came against terrible teams. For the most part, when the Colts played better teams, his production dropped off quite a bit, and he got off to a really bad start. Like, I don't think he topped, 75 yards until like week 5. So, you got to factor that in. Those games count too. And then I just looked it up. Yards from scrimmage, all-time leaders for a single season. Taylor's only 30th all time. So there are a lot of running back seasons that were significantly better than this one. I know we fall in love with the amount of touchdowns he scored, and he had 1,800 yards. Keep in mind, extra game too. I just don't think it was as special a season as what Cooper Kupp did, which is, win the Triple Crown for receivers. That's only been done 4 or 5 times. So I think you got to give him the nod. He was the most consistent offensive player outside of quarterbacks this year, and he deserves recognition for that. All
right. Coach of the Year. This is where Robert and I are going to differ. I know it. I've got Kyle Shanahan of the Niners. Okay. I look at what happened, how far they got with Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's a heck of a coaching performance. I mean, they had to win the last game to get in. They go on the road and they beat Dallas. Okay. Now I understand Dallas played like garbage, but still. And then they go into Green Bay and they beat Justin's Packers with special teams, and they did a nice job of shutting down Rodgers. And then, of course, the luck ran out against the Rams because Jimmy G just couldn't get it done at the end. So I think Kyle Shanahan deserves some props. And also, he had to deal with, they drafted a quarterback, Trey Lance, in the first round. So he had to deal with the locker room, possibly, fracturing with what quarterback should start and everything. But I think he got the most out of that offense with Garoppolo. Now, yeah, they have a very good defense, obviously, Boza and the crew there. But I'm just saying that for where they got to get to the Final Four with Jimmy Garoppolo as their main starting quarterback is not a bad coaching job. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, we definitely differ here because I don't think that, choker of the year, sure. Coach of the year, no way. My coach of the year is Zach Taylor of the Bengals. And I don't think he's getting enough conversation for this award. I think that you're seeing it directed at other coaches, even Matt LaFleur, because they've snubbed him for this award before, and his success with the Packers, and maybe some other guys out there. But this is a guy that a lot of people wondered why the Bengals retained him after 2 years when they didn't do anything. And I think that Joe Burrow's injury may have played a role in him staying around, or just the Bengals, their long time kind of reluctance to fire coaches this soon. So he gets another shot, and what's he do with it? They win 10 games and win the AFC North. And coming into this year, I think people thought that the Bengals might be a little bit better, but they certainly didn't predict this. And that was before even the playoff run that they've had. That winning 10 games and winning the division, I don't think a lot of people had that. So I'm giving this to Zach Taylor. I think he deserves kudos for what he's done in Cincinnati. They've built up a good team there. Obviously Burrow at quarterback helps him a lot. The defense is solid. And here they are. They're playing for the Super Bowl.
No, that is a worthy choice. Absolutely, Rob. I don't disagree with you. I would say that if I had to pick my top three, that obviously, he's there too. So, all right,
I'm
Justin.
not surprised at a choker.
Oh, okay. Go, Justin. Who do you have for Coach of the Year?
I think both of you guys are nuts for different reasons. Chris, this is the problem with you kind of using your own metrics to pick these awards, is that the postseason doesn't matter. They're not factored into these awards. So why you're making your own rules over here? It makes no sense. Listen, I had the 49ers going to the Super Bowl this year, if you guys remember, and if this was a 16-week season, they wouldn't have been in. I think they underperformed during the regular season, to be honest. And I think that, they got to where they are because of their defense, not because of Kyle Shanahan. They were a bad team the first half of the year. So he's not getting my vote. You guys want to call me bitter because they beat Green Bay, whatever, but I don't think you can make any argument he was the best coach this year. Robert, Zach Taylor, I don't know. I think that the Bengals lost some really bad games this year. I think he's a really conservative play caller. I don't think you should get a ton of credit because you developed an offense where your quarterback coming off an ACL injury gets murdered every game, and basically you do or die based on chucking it up to Jamar Chase and hoping he makes a play. So I wasn't impressed with him. I think he would have been a consideration to lose his job had they not snuck into the playoffs. Obviously, that's not going to happen now with them in the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be Mike Vrabel that's going to win this award. I think Matt LaFleur is going to get some votes. My pick is a guy who doesn't have a job right now, and that's Rich Bisaccia from Oakland. I think, just considering all that they had to deal with this year, from the John Gruden nonsense to Henry Ruggs, his legal situation with his drunk driving, that Raiders team, granted, they certainly had their ups and downs on the field too, but considering the situation they were in, getting into the playoffs when they were certainly not picked as a playoff team before the season, I just think that the coach who did the most in the worst situation is by far him. I just don't think anyone really stands out. I wasn't impressed with the Titans. They were a fraud number one seed. So that kind of dings Vrabel for me. And then, with the Packers and LaFleur, their offense was really, it wasn't as dynamic as it was last year. Yes, he dealt with a lot of nonsense with Rodgers and just injuries, but I think he did a better coaching job, frankly, his last year. So with that logic, I would go with Bisaccia, who doesn't have a job right now. And I hope he comes and coaches special teams in Green Bay. Honestly, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yep. Our last award, MVP, Aaron Rodgers. I picked your boy, Justin. The numbers speak for themselves. And I know, not a surprise. Go ahead, Robert. Who do you have as your MVP?
Well, I didn't go with Rodgers for this one, although I do believe he is a great candidate for it. I went with Tom Brady. You know, I don't think people have really looked hard enough, you know, in their rush to make this another lock for Rodgers, that, you know, Brady put up some of the best numbers of his career. You know, and I know that there's that additional 17th game to consider, but even without that, he's still a 5,000-yard passer this year and threw for over 40 touchdowns. So, you know, this is a guy that, you know, I know that he just retired. We'll talk about that next week. But, you know, at 44, he's still lighting it up like that. Like it's just crazy to me. He hasn't put up, I think his last 5,000-yard season was 10 years ago. So that tells you how rare that is for Brady, even though he's a perennial 4,000-yard passer. And the touchdown numbers were just insane too. So, you know, another great year for him. And I think that, you know, he was the MVP. You know, Rodgers, I get why he's in the conversation. Another great year for him. You know, I think at the end of the day, he'll win it. But for me, the difference was that, you know, Brady just seemed to do more with less. You know, he had the Antonio Brown situation. Yeah, he's got Mike Evans down there, you know, but Gronk wasn't healthy at times. You know, he lost Chris Godwin late in the season. You know, Rodgers, you know, that offense, to Ritz's point, probably wasn't as dynamic as it was last year. And I think that's, you know, really that was a tiebreaker for me. This was a tough one. It was a real toss up for me. But for me, it was, you know, Brady's ability to put up even bigger numbers than he did last year. And that set him apart at the end of the day.
You get the last word, Justin. Who's your MVP?
Well, I've seen some of those arguments which Robert brought up. The fact that Brady's 44 years old, and you know, his numbers were arguably better this year, whereas Rodgers went down. But the fact is you can't factor that stuff in. This is strictly a 2021 award. Whatever happened in the past doesn't matter. Listen, Brady had a great year, and certainly I think you can make a great case for him. If he won it, I don't think he's going to, because Rodgers was kind of the far and away first team All-Pro pick. But, you know, if you want to pick Brady, that's fine. The fact that he played in all 17 games, which Rodgers did not, I don't think you can ding him for why he was absent. I don't think that's right. But the fact is, he didn't play in a game. He was unavailable. I think you got to treat that just like like Kyler Murray missed a few games because he was injured. That hurt his case, you know, middle of the season. I guess but my biggest gripe with Robert's argument, you know, you say Brady dealt with more issues. You know, hey, Antonio Brown was Brady's guy. He wanted Antonio Brown there. So you get what, you know, you get what comes with that. And then, you know, Chris Godwin, yes, he got hurt. That was pretty late in the season. He still played, you know, 13, 14 games. I think the difference for me is Rodgers dealt with backups along his offensive line the entire season. That was a shell of the unit that was really good last year. And, you know, that goes with the receivers too. You know, Devontae Adams is great. Obviously, he played pretty much every game except for one. Coincidentally, he also missed a game because of COVID. Just the amount of moving parts that were going on with the Packers. I think Rodgers was, again, the most efficient quarterback. Like the 37-4 touchdown to pick ratio is just insane. And I think if you're making an argument for Brady, you point to the yards. I don't think yards are as valuable as some people are arguing this year. Otherwise, Drew Brees would have, you know, 6 MVPs. You know, Jameis Winston threw for 5,000 yards with this team a couple of years ago. So, you know, hey, it's a great accomplishment for Brady. But when the award has the word valuable in it, I think Rodgers could have done in Tampa what Brady did this year. I don't think Brady could have done what Rodgers did. There was just too many moving parts. He really relied on that protection that Rodgers wasn't afforded this year. So it's close. I mean, I'm not going to throw my arms up if Brady were to win, but I think Rodgers gets the slight edge.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up, folks. Appreciate you joining us. Next week will be our Super Bowl preview show. We hope to have a special guest. Until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.